Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on how the federal NDP is faring in the wake of this week's by-elections. But first, aligning in opposition.
Anybody that wants to work with us, we're more than happy to talk to so that we can deal with this referendum and make sure that it doesn't succeed.
Alberta Liberals, long absent from the legislature but keen to have a voice, are partnering with a well-known political strategist to build a Just Vote No campaign ahead of the anticipated October 19th referendum that will feature no fewer than 9 questions. And that political strategist, Stephen Carter, president of Decide Campaigns, joins us now. Mr. Carter, good to have you on Alberta Primetime.
Thanks very much, Michael. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right. People who follow politics in this province know you've worked in the past with everyone from Daniel Smith to Naheed Nenshi, Alison Redford, Jyoti Gondek, quite the spectrum of politicians. So what brings you to a partnership with the Alberta Liberals?
Well, I think that everybody that you just mentioned would work together to oppose these referendum questions. They are tragic questions that are putting our society at risk. And I think that we need to stand together, stand united, opposed to them. And the Liberal Party was a fantastic vehicle that we could work with, that's available to us. The New Democrats are already doing their project, which I wholeheartedly endorse and encourage. And Thomas Lukaszik's doing his, which I also wholeheartedly encourage and endorse. There's lots of space here to oppose these referendum questions.
Okay, so maybe less about ideology, more about marriage of convenience?
More about a marriage of inspiration. We are both inspired to attack these referendum questions and try and push them back. I know that people talk about the separation question as though it's the only question. It's just one of the separation questions. We are arguing that all 10 of these potential questions are in fact separation questions. They're just to different degrees. So that's what we're trying to do is push back together against these the referendum questions, and that's the agenda that has been created so far.
How much of a vehicle is this for fundraising?
Well, tax receipts are available from political parties, and they're not available from third-party advertisers. That is a financial advantage that political parties bring to the table. They're also able to spend at a different rate than third-party advertisers. Third-party advertisers are maxed out at $607,000. A political party can go as high as $5 million. We don't anticipate being anywhere near that, but nonetheless, it does give us the opportunity to give our donors more bang for their buck.
Well, okay, so where fundraising is concerned, what is it going to take to have an effective voice? How big of a machine do you see needing to be built?
Everyone who wants to join. Every single person who wants to be a part of this initiative should be a part of this initiative. If you want, and you don't have to join the Alberta Liberal Party to be a part of it. You can be part of what we're calling a constellation campaign, where if you're trying to convince your book club that they should oppose the referendum questions, then you're part of our team. Our team is broad, it is wide, it has the capacity to accommodate multiple different points of view. We've got people who used to be part of the UCP cabinet that have joined us to oppose these referendum questions. That's the type of breadth that we want to be able to bring that maybe the NDP couldn't bring. But that's the joy of working with a relatively neutral party like the Alberta Liberals.
This can't come cheap, though. Like you'll need to pack a bit of a dollar punch.
Well, I mean, as much as we can raise, though. But the way that we're trying to do this is to engage volunteers at the grassroots level to do the campaigning within their own neighborhoods, within their own constructs. This isn't designed to be a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign like the government's going to do. This is designed to be tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe that would add up to $1 million in total.
You mentioned Thomas Lukaszik, campaign by the NDP. This could end up being a very crowded space. So what does that say about the degree of divisive debate that lies ahead of a referendum on October 19th? Separation question or not?
I mean, Albertans need to have a robust discussion about these referendum questions. Do we really want to see immigrants unable to put their children in school? How many of us are second or third generation people that have come to this province that wouldn't have the opportunity to have our children educated? This was ridiculous. We must educate everyone in our province. We can't have a second class of citizen or a second class of resident. The same would apply with the idea of paying for health care. These things will come and bite us in the butt later. We have to find a way to oppose them and robustly have a conversation about what our province is going to look like in the future. And that's what this entire thing is based on, is developing a common set of communication tools that will be able to be used across the province.
Okay, so you've teamed up with the Alberta Liberals. What needs to happen now for the Just Vote No campaign to truly take shape, hit the ground running?
We need as many people as possible to come to our May 2nd AGM to learn about how the campaign is going to unfold, how they can be participants in the campaign, and then immediately after May the 2nd, once assuming that the completion of our partnership, once we've started on that, then we need as many Albertans as possible to participate in this campaign, whether they're participating with Thomas Lukaszuk, the NDP, or with us.
And how do you expect the other side of the coin to respond to any of these campaigns, yours included? Do you expect to have to engage with them directly?
I would expect that they will do what they always do, which is try and change the rules to ensure that we're less effective. We see that today with the boundary commission's changes. This is not a team of people that want to follow the rules. They're a team of people who want to manipulate the rules to be successful. And that's what we are tremendously afraid of, is that ultimately the UCP will do what they want to do anyways, regardless of how this referendum ends up.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, Mr. Carter. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for reaching out.
That's political strategist Stephen Carter. From campaigns queuing up to oppose provincial referendum questions to what's at stake for the federal NDP in the wake of this week's by-elections. Time now for tonight's politics panel. Joining us this evening, Najib Judd, political advisor and branch strategist who's worked on election campaigns at every level of government here and abroad, and John Santos, political analyst. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with Stephen Carter, partnering with Alberta Liberals on a campaign opposing the Smith government's referendum questions. Najib, we heard from the political strategist off the top. What's to be made of the rationale for tag teaming with a party long absent from the legislature?
Well, I think it wasn't accurate to describe the Alberta Liberals as neutral, more like irrelevant. This kind of stuff, as taxpayers, we should be really offended by this. I'm not saying that $600,000 isn't enough money to reach every Albertan, which you don't have to reach every Albertan. You only have to reach people who vote. And then second of all, do we need a fifth player in this mess? Another organization wasting money on this. We're going to have the NDP and the UCP wasting money on this. You've got Thomas Lukaszuk's campaign, and then you've got the separatists themselves, and now we're going to have a fifth player confusing and muddying the waters. They've already out there talking about just say no when nothing's been decided in terms of the question format. And then it's even more confusing as it moves on, because you've got all these different slogans. You've got For Alberta, for Canada. You've got Stay Free Alberta. You've got a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, Forever Canadian. All of this stuff just confuses people more and more, and either people are going to check out or people are going to vote the wrong way than what these all these different organizations intend.
John, how do you gauge the impact of a campaign like the one that Stephen Carter's bringing to the table here?
I mean, his point about there are a lot of fundraising advantages that parties have in the ability to issue tax receipts, for example, and the kind of incentive that creates to donate money, the increased amount of money that they can spend. So notwithstanding Najib's excellent point that, do we really need to be spending more taxpayer dollars in the rebates that come from political contributions? There are benefits to fundraising through a political party, and it's exactly the ones that Stephen Carter mentioned. And so I think fundraising is going to be one of the big metrics there. And then the kind of attendance that they can get to whatever events that they hold, that's going to be another metric against which we can evaluate the success of their campaign. But ultimately, how we're going to measure this is what kind of a turnout do we see when the referendum does happen, and what kind of results are we going to see? Are we going to see an overwhelming defeat of either the separation question or any of the individual other policy questions that the government is putting forward? That ultimately will be the test of how successful any of these campaigns are.
Najib, the other partner here, could this help breathe some new life into the Alberta Liberals? What's to be made of that party's foray into debate over referendum contention?
No, it's going to have zero effect for the Alberta Liberals. And actually what it will do is, have people associate being against separatism as being a liberal thing, which, in a conservative stronghold like Alberta is not a good association. It's all very poorly, I think, contrived. Like I said, we don't need another fifth player in this muddying the water. We don't need more confusion on things that aren't even decided yet. And also the last thing we need, and this should anger every Albertan, every taxpayer, the fact that, now an organization is looking to waste, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this initiative.
All right. Well, Stephen Carter is teaming up with the Alberta Liberals, Thomas Lukaszuk. He was busy addressing a packed house in Calgary on Wednesday.
Everything's at stake. People ask me, what do we have to lose? And we have to lose everything. So we're not only fighting a political battle over here, which it isn't. We're fighting actually an existential battle for the future of not only Alberta, but frankly, for the future of the rest of Canada.
Lukaszuk, whose successful Forever Canadian petition remains in limbo while being dealt with by a legislative committee. He says he's starting a new referendum campaign, ready to mobilize volunteers starting in May. They will be canvassing to spread what he calls real information. John, we've been talking about multiple groups organizing, so how crowded a space could this actually end up being?
As Najib said, it's already quite crowded, but I think the difference with what Thomas Lukaszuk has been doing is the fact that it's a step removed from the big P political partisan arena. That's the kind of thing that is really going to bring people together. And Najib also mentioned the point that having Carter's project with associating with the Liberals, whatever the provincial Liberals may or may not stand for these days, right? There's still that historical association that they have had with the federal Liberal Party, and a lot of the separatist sentiment in Alberta is driven or at least correlated with antipathy towards the federal Liberal Party. And so I think even if, Thomas Lukaszuk's group continues to do a campaign, or other civil society organizations come forward to do their own campaign, I think that's actually where we're going to see a lot of I don't want to say more sincere, because I think a lot of conversations about this are sincere, regardless of how informed they are. But that's where we're going to have some of the more sober conversations that are going to be less politically charged. They're going to be less tainted by partisanship. And I think that's where sort of the higher quality debate is going to be happening, because, it is a step removed from the political arena. So, yes, it's a crowded field, but I think it's organizations like Forever Canadian and other similar campaigns that might rise up, that we're going to have a higher quality of debate, exactly because it's removed from the political arena.
Well, and Najib, to be a higher quality of debate, how much money is it going to take for any of these campaigns, whether it's Forever Canadian or otherwise, to be an effective vehicle? And is there the money out there in Alberta right now to support any of that?
Well, it's going to take millions. You know what I mean? Already, Stephen Carter saying that $600,000, $607,000 isn't enough. So how much are the other organizations spending? I mean, definitely the UCP is going to spend millions. The NDP is going to spend a considerable amount of money. All the players that need to be present are already present. Thomas Lukaszik's campaign, which has a lot of momentum, is all that we need to really represent the Albertans who don't want to separate. And that's the campaign that should be supported. The NDP are doing their jobs, opposition. The UCP is doing their job. The separatists are doing their jobs. We have all the players we need in this, phenomenal waste of money and time to begin with. And the last thing we need is just another organization out there. And absolutely, and John hit it on the head. Other smaller organizations are also going to do their part. What they won't be doing, though, is asking taxpayers to pay for it.
John, how do you, maybe as a last question, how do you see the separatist movement responding to the growing number of campaigns out there pushing a pro-Canada narrative?
They're going to use it to further support their narrative, right? Like, I can already see the future social media posts from the separatists saying, oh, like, more Liberals lining up against Alberta. This is why we need to separate. And I think that's sort of the message that I would say to anyone who wants to get involved is, think about the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, right? The first obligation is to do no harm. And with how complex this environment is, the potential for misinformation and disinformation is adding another voice or another message going to help, or might it actually inadvertently do harm to the very cause that people want to support? That's really sort of the big question that people have to ask themselves.
Okay, time for us to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, how federal New Democrats are faring with the Carney Liberals now in a majority. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. In the wake of this week's 3 federal by-elections, we've discussed the road forward for the Carney government now that it has a majority, and what lies ahead for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre after losing MPs to floor crossings. But what about Avi Lewis and the NDP?
Canadians did not elect a majority government, and if they end up with one, largely through floor crossings, it just feels wrong. And I think Canadians are disturbed by this.
While no new NDP MPs were elected Monday, the party's vote share was up in both Ontario ridings. The New Democrats also had their parliamentary funding reinstated this week after losing official party status in the federal election nearly a year ago. Najib, what's to be made of how the NDP fared in Monday's by-election, even in comparison to the Conservatives?
Well, I mean, I think it's too early to, make this a referendum on Avi Lewis. He just became leader. But I do think that, we saw some positive signs for the NDP in these by-elections. They did double their vote in Rosedale. They had I think a good showing overall. I mean, the NDP has to fight its way out of the wilderness, which it was left with the last leader, and becoming a party of consultants and corporates, and being back to worker party. And, the more they describe Avi Lewis as a radical, I think the more attractive it is for people who are looking for that radical left party that the NDP is supposed to be. It's supposed to be our worker party. It's supposed to be the Labour Party of Canada, and it's long lost its way. And I think that it is. We need strong opposition. I'm a big believer in that, and the NDP is part of that opposition. I don't agree with Mr. Lewis that the floor crossings are not what Albertans or Canadians voted for. I mean, at the end of the day, the Liberals are doing what they have to do to attract people to their party and get majority, and that's not an accusation against the Liberals. It's it is against the Conservatives who can't seem to hold on to their MPs because they have an unattractive leader who should have resigned and then appointed a new leader that would have instilled confidence in the Conservative Party.
John, on that point of leadership, it was late last month New Democrats picked their new leader. From your standpoint, anything to read into the results where Avi Lewis is concerned?
I mean, Probably not. He was the front runner. I think it was always a tough road for Heather McPherson to climb for her to beat him. But I think if the party members were smart, they would have voted for McPherson. I mean, sort of the irony with all of this is that Avi Lewis is perceived to be, you know, this far left radical that may as well have been like a Marxist university professor, whereas the NDP leader that was most successful federally was Jack Layton, who actually had a PhD, but was seen as a man of the people, right? And I think this is sort of the difficulty that Avi Lewis has ahead of him, is that he is from that far left wing of the party. And you know, Najib says that folks on the left are looking for that, perhaps. But I think part of the success of the federal Liberals has been because Mark Carney has been very pragmatic, right? The fact that he's been able to pull floor caucus from both the Conservatives and the New Democrats shows a very pragmatic approach to politics. And I think Canadians want to see politicians work together. They want to see politicians looking for practical solutions and not spouting off, you know, whatever stereotypical ideological message that leaders like Pierre Poilievre like to spout off on. And so I think if Avi Lewis thinks that he's going to grow the NDP by being the Pierre Poilievre on the left, he's sadly mistaken, and the NDP will continue to be irrelevant on the federal scene.
Najib, no by-election wins this week, but how big of a win is it for the NDP caucus to have its parliamentary funding reinstated 1 year after losing official party status?
Well, you know, I'm kind of torn on that. You know, on one hand, you know, they only have 6 seats. They did lose official party status. They need 12 seats for that. You know, and I think that, you know, that should be reflected in funding and things like that. But on the other hand, like I said, I think we need a strong opposition. We need more than one opposition party. We need a strong opposition party, and it's good for democracy. It's good for Canadians to have those options and choices. So if that helps them in terms of funding, I think that's a good thing. You know, and you know, I will disagree with John. You know, I think that, you know, as politics keeps moving to the center and everybody's catering to this mythical centrist voter, you know, and we have a center-right and center-left parties, you know, in these duopolies that exist in different countries, including Canada. I do think you need an anchor on the left, you know, and I think that the NDP members chose rightly, and I think it's reflective of what, you know, they see missing in representation. You know, that those true leftist values, those true leftist and progressive values that, you know, parties like the Liberals, the Democrats, and other parties we see around the world have left that base and orphaned that base. You know, people who truly want working class representation. So, and I think that's why they chose Avi Lewis. And you know, as much as they're going to try to paint him as a Marxist and a communist and all these kinds of things, I think that if he does his job right and communicates properly his ideas, I think he can dispel a lot of that narrative.
All right, gentlemen, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about what the future holds for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre now that Mark Carney's Liberals have a majority government. Clark says Canadians need to set Carney's bar higher. So much wasting time on one opposition party. Who is running the country anyways, journalists or the government? According to the great Lambrini, he'll never get the message, too self-absorbed. He puts himself over his party and puts both of them over his country. Barbarella tells us nothing. He just keeps the Liberals on their toes. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow with proposed recommendations for new electoral boundaries map being rejected, we'll have reaction to the government's replacement process. That's on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.